The text message glowed on Maggie's phone screen like a neon sign in hell. Can't wait to have you in our bed again tonight. Your hair looked incredible this morning. B. I stood there in my own kitchen, holding my wife's unlocked phone, reading words that turned my 20-year marriage into ash. The coffee mug in my other hand trembled slightly. Outside, the October rain hammered our suburban Boston windows like bullets. Our bed. Not his bed. Our bed. The bed where I'd been sleeping alone for the past 3 months, while Maggie claimed she needed space to think about us. My name is Jon Baker. I'm 45 years old, a marine engineer who designs harbor systems for a living. I fix things that are broken underwater, which is ironic considering I never saw the wreckage of my own life coming. The phone buzzed again. Another message from B. Tell John you're working late again. I've got champagne and that lingerie you left here. 20 years, 2 sons, a mortgage, family vacations to Cape Cod, Christmas mornings. All of it reduced to lies and late-night excuses about depositions and client meetings. I heard Maggie's BMW pull into our driveway. The garage door rumbled open. She'd be walking through that kitchen door in 30 seconds, probably with some story about traffic or a difficult client. My hands were surprisingly steady as I set her phone back exactly where she'd left it, next to the coffee maker. John, I'm home. Her voice carried that forced cheerfulness she'd been using lately. The tone you use with elderly relatives or sick children. Maggie walked into the kitchen looking like she'd stepped out of a law firm brochure. Perfectly styled blonde hair, navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, heels that clicked against our hardwood floors like a countdown timer. At 43, she was still beautiful in that sharp, untouchable way that had first attracted me in college. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, not really looking at me as she opened the refrigerator. "Enlightening," I said. "How was yours? Productive meeting with your boss?" She froze for just a moment, her hand on a bottle of white wine. "Yes, very productive. Brett had some complex cases to review." Brett. So B was Brett Garris, the senior partner at Morrison, Garris and Associates, where Maggie worked as a paralegal. I'd met him at office parties. Balding, arrogant, the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne to mask his insecurity. The kind of man who probably called other men sport and tipped badly at restaurants. "Brett seems like a hands-on boss," I said. "He's very thorough," Maggie replied, still not meeting my eyes. "I'll probably have to work late again tomorrow." Big case. The lie slid out of her mouth as easily as breathing. I wondered how many others there had been. How many late meetings and client emergencies had actually been hotel rooms and afternoon encounters. "Maggie," I said quietly, "we need to talk." She finally looked at me, and for a split second I saw something flicker across her face. Fear, maybe, or guilt. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that practiced smile she'd been giving me for months. "Can it wait?" "I'm exhausted, and I still have work to review tonight." More work, always more work. I nodded and watched her pour herself a large glass of wine. She took it upstairs to our bedroom, the same bedroom where she'd apparently been entertaining Brett Garris. I sat alone in our kitchen, listening to the rain and the sound of her shower running overhead. 20 years of marriage, and I was about to discover just how little I actually knew about the woman I'd loved since college. My phone rang. Bob Martinez, my business partner and the closest thing I had to a best friend. "John, you sound like hell," he said after I answered. "Feel like it too. What's up?" "Just checking in." "You've seemed off lately. Everything okay at home?" Bob had always been perceptive. We'd started our marine engineering firm together 8 years ago, building it from nothing into a respectable business. He was the kind of friend who noticed when you were drowning, even when you were trying to hide it. "Maggie's having an affair," I said. The words came out flat, matter-of-fact, silence on the other end. Then, "Jesus, John, are you sure? Found the text messages, pretty explicit stuff." "With who?" Her boss, guy named Brett. The pompous ass from the Christmas party, the one who kept calling me Chief, that's him. Bob was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when your life implodes on a rainy Tuesday evening, when the person you trusted most in the world turns out to be a stranger? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm going to find out. After we hung up, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at our kitchen table, staring at the framed photos on the wall. Our wedding day, the boys' graduations, family vacations, all of it felt like evidence from someone else's life. Upstairs, I could hear Maggie moving around, probably getting ready for another late night at the office. I wondered if Brett was waiting for her somewhere, champagne chilled, ready to celebrate another successful deception. The bourbon burned, but it was a clean burn. Honest. Unlike everything else in my life. The next evening, I came home early. Not planned. Just one of those days when the harbor project wrapped up ahead of schedule, and I found myself pulling into our driveway at 4:30 instead of 6. Maggie's car was there, along with a silver Mercedes I didn't recognize. The house was quiet when I walked in, but not empty quiet. There was something in the air, a tension, like the moment before thunder. I climbed the stairs slowly, my work boots heavy on each step. The bedroom door was closed, but I could hear voices. Maggie's laugh, breathy and intimate. A man's voice, low and satisfied. I stood outside our bedroom door for maybe 10 seconds, listening to my wife with another man in our bed. Then I turned the handle and walked in. They were under the covers, but there was no mistaking what I'd interrupted. Maggie's face went white. Brett Garris, naked from the waist up, scrambled for his clothes like a teenager caught by parents. "Jon!" Maggie clutched the sheet to her chest. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. Traffic was light. Brett had managed to get his pants on and was reaching for his shirt. He was exactly what I'd expected. Soft around the middle, thinning hair, the kind of man who probably paid for an expensive gym membership he never used. "Look, Jon," Brett started, his voice taking on that lawyer tone. "This is awkward, but we're all adults here." I grabbed him by what was left of his hair and yanked him toward the bedroom door. He yelped like a kicked dog. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice still eerily calm. "Get out now or I'll throw you out the window." "You can't threaten me." Brett's voice cracked. "I'll call the police." I slapped him. Not hard enough to really hurt him, but hard enough to shut him up. The sound echoed in our bedroom like a gunshot. "The police?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Go ahead. Call them. Tell them how you were in my bed with my wife. I'm sure that'll go over great with your law partners." Brett grabbed his shirt and shoes and practically ran from the room. I heard him stumble down the stairs and slam the front door behind him. Maggie was sitting up in bed now, the sheet wrapped around her like armor. Her face had gone from white to red, anger replacing embarrassment. "How dare you?" she said. "How dare you come home and humiliate me like that?" I stared at her. "I humiliated you? I'm not the one screwing around in our marriage bed. Don't you dare take that tone with me, Jon Baker. You have no idea what it's like being married to you. No idea what I've had to put up with. Enlighten me." She stood up, clutching the sheet, her eyes blazing. "You're a child, Jon. A 45-year-old child who expects me to clean up after him, take care of him, manage his life. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who can't even load a dishwasher properly? So, you decided to solve that problem by sleeping with your boss? Brett makes me feel like a woman again, like I'm worth something. When's the last time you made me feel special, Jon? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than just your housekeeper?" The words hit like physical blows. 20 years of marriage, reduced to complaints about dishwashers and housework? "When's the last time you gave me a chance?" I shot back. When's the last time you came home without some excuse about work? When's the last time you looked at me like I was more than just a paycheck? That's different. How? How is it different? She couldn't answer that. Instead, she turned away and started getting dressed, pulling on clothes with sharp, angry movements. I want you out, she said without looking at me. This is my house too. I want you out tonight. Go stay with Bob or get a hotel room. I don't care, but I can't look at you right now. I laughed again, that same bitter sound. You can't look at me? I'm not the one who just got caught cheating. You don't understand anything, she said, turning back to face me. You never have. Brett understands me. He appreciates me. He doesn't expect me to be his mother. I never expected you to be my mother, Maggie. I expected you to be my wife. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something that might have been regret or sadness. But it was gone quickly, replaced by that cold anger I'd been seeing more and more lately. Well, maybe you should have thought of that before you became someone I couldn't respect. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. 20 years of marriage, and it came down to this. Standing in our bedroom, fully clothed while she got dressed, both of us throwing words like weapons. I'll pack a bag, I said finally. Good. I went to our closet and threw some clothes into an overnight bag. Maggie sat at her vanity, fixing her makeup like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just blown up our entire life. Jon, she said, as I headed for the door. I stopped, hoping for something. An apology, maybe. Some sign that 20 years had meant something to her. Don't do anything stupid, she said, not looking at me in the mirror. I walked out without another word. My boat became my refuge. The Down Deep was a 36-foot cabin cruiser I'd bought 5 years ago, moored at Charlestown Marina. Maggie had always hated it, called it my midlife crisis floating in the harbor. Now it felt like the only honest thing in my life. The first week was rough. I drank too much bourbon and slept badly on the narrow berth. The October nights were getting cold, and the boat's heating system was more suggestion than reality. But it was mine, and it was clean. No lies, no deception, just the honest creak of fiberglass and the sound of water against the hull. Bob came by every day, bringing coffee and increasingly worried looks. You can't live on this boat forever, he said on Thursday morning, settling into the small galley with 2 cups of coffee from the marina's shop. Why not? It's got everything I need. Bed, kitchen, bathroom. More honest than my house ever was. Jon, you look like hell. When's the last time you shaved or showered? I rubbed my face, feeling several days of stubble. I'm fine. No, you're not. You're hiding. And that's not like you. Bob was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. The boat felt safe, contained. A place where I could think without hearing Maggie's voice or seeing reminders of our life together. Have you talked to the boys? Bob asked. My sons. Sid was 22, finishing his senior year at Boston University. Jimmy was 20, a sophomore at Northeastern. Both good kids, both probably wondering why their father had suddenly moved onto a boat without explanation. Not yet. I don't know what to tell them. How about the truth? That their mother is sleeping with her boss? That their parents' marriage was apparently a sham? Yeah, that'll go over great. Bob sipped his coffee and studied me. What's Maggie telling people? I hadn't thought about that. In the fog of betrayal and bourbon, I'd forgotten that life continued outside my floating exile. People would ask questions. Friends, neighbors, co-workers. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe you should find out. That afternoon, I called my neighbor, Tom Richardson. Tom and his wife, Carol, had been to our house for barbecues, dinner parties, all the suburban rituals of married life. Jon, how are you, buddy? Tom's voice was carefully cheerful, the tone people use when they know something's wrong but don't want to be the first to mention it. I'm okay, Tom. Just calling to check in. Good, good. Hey, Carol saw Maggie at the grocery store yesterday. She seemed, well, she seemed pretty upset. Said you'd been having some problems. Something about work stress and you needing some space to figure things out. Work stress, space to figure things out. Not, I caught my wife in bed with her boss. Maggie was already spinning the story, painting herself as the victim of my instability. Yeah, something like that, I said. Well, if you need anything, just ask. We're here for you both. Both. Tom still thought this was a temporary rough patch, the kind of thing married couples work through with counseling and patience. I hung up and called my son Sid. Dad? Where are you? Mom said you moved out. I'm staying on the boat for a while. Just need some time to think. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hung in the air. I could hear traffic in the background. Sid was probably walking between classes, trying to process his parents' imploding marriage while juggling midterm exams. I don't know yet, son. It's complicated. Mom says you've been under a lot of stress at work, that you've been drinking and acting erratic. There it was, Maggie's version of events, already poisoning my relationship with my own children. I was the unstable one, the one who couldn't handle pressure, who'd abandoned his family over work stress. Sid, that's not exactly... Dad, I don't want to take sides. But Mom's really upset. She says you just walked out without trying to work things out. I closed my eyes. How do you tell your son that his mother is a liar and a cheat without destroying his relationship with her? How do you defend yourself without looking petty and vindictive? We'll talk more when you're home for Thanksgiving, I said finally. Okay, Dad. I love you. Love you too, son. After we hung up, I sat in the boat's small cabin and realized how completely Maggie had outmaneuvered me. While I'd been wallowing in betrayal and bourbon, she'd been busy crafting a narrative that made her the victim and me the villain. By the time I figured out what was happening, she'd already won the first battle. That evening, I walked to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar near the marina where the bartender didn't ask questions and the bourbon was cheap. I'd been there every night since moving onto the boat, not because I enjoyed drinking alone, but because it was better than sitting in the cabin with my thoughts. I was halfway through my second drink when I heard familiar laughter from across the bar. Maggie's laugh, the one I'd been hearing for 20 years. I turned around and saw her at a corner table with 3 other women, her sister Janet, her friend Carol from work, and someone I didn't recognize. They hadn't seen me yet. I was just another guy in a dark bar, invisible in my work clothes and several days of stubble, but I could hear their conversation clearly. I just don't understand men, Maggie was saying. 20 years I've been taking care of him, managing his life, and this is how he repays me. Just walks out without a word of explanation. Men are children, Janet said. She'd never liked me, had always thought Maggie could do better. They expect you to be their mother and their wife at the same time. John's always been selfish, Carol added. Remember that time at your anniversary party when he disappeared for 2 hours? Just went off by himself without telling anyone where he was going. I remembered that party. I'd stepped outside for some air and ended up talking to an elderly neighbor about his service in Korea. 2 hours of listening to war stories from a lonely old man, and it became evidence of my selfishness. The worst part is how he's acting now, Maggie continued. Drinking, living on that stupid boat, refusing to answer my calls. It's like he's having some kind of breakdown. Have you thought about calling someone? The woman I didn't recognize asked. I mean, if he's really unstable. I've considered it, Maggie said. For his own good, you know. He clearly can't take care of himself. I finished my drink and left the bar without them seeing me, but I'd heard enough. Maggie wasn't just spinning a story about our separation. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger. Something that would paint me as mentally unstable, unable to care for myself, possibly dangerous. Walking back to the marina, I realized that my wife wasn't just a cheater. She was something much worse. She was calculating, methodical, and she was playing a game I didn't even know had started. But I was about to learn the rules. I spent the weekend planning, not drinking, not wallowing, planning. By Monday morning, I had a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. First, I needed allies. People who knew the real Jon Baker, not the unstable drunk Maggie was describing to anyone who would listen. I started with Bob, who was already on my side, then expanded to clients, neighbors, and co-workers who'd seen me at my best. Second, I needed evidence. Maggie thought she was clever, but she'd made mistakes. The text messages were just the beginning. Third, I needed to control the narrative. Maggie had gotten a head start, but I had something she didn't: the truth. Monday afternoon, I drove to our house while Maggie was at work. I still had keys, and technically, I still lived there. I wasn't breaking in, I was retrieving my property. I went straight to Maggie's home office, a converted bedroom where she kept files, her computer, and various personal items. If there was evidence of her affair beyond the text messages, it would be here. Her computer was password protected, but I knew Maggie well enough to guess. She'd always used variations of our anniversary date and the boys' names. After 3 tries, I was in. Her email was a goldmine. Months of correspondence with Brett, starting professional and gradually becoming personal, then intimate. Hotel reservations, restaurant receipts. Photos I definitely didn't want to see but needed to document. But the real discovery was in a folder labeled Legal Consultation. Emails between Maggie and a divorce attorney, dated 3 weeks before I'd caught her with Brett. She'd been planning this for months, consulting lawyers about asset division, custody arrangements, and something called mental health considerations in divorce proceedings. One email made my blood run cold. As we discussed, if John's drinking and erratic behavior can be documented, it would significantly strengthen your position regarding both asset division and any potential restraining order. I recommend keeping detailed records of any incidents, including dates, times, and witnesses when possible. She hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been building a case against me, documenting every argument, every drink, every moment of frustration as evidence of my instability. The affair wasn't a moment of weakness. It was part of a calculated plan to destroy me and take everything we'd built together. I printed everything, every email, every photo, every hotel receipt. Then I copied it all to a flash drive and put the originals in a safety deposit box at my bank. That evening, I called a lawyer of my own. Patricia Wells specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for being thorough and ruthless. She agreed to see me the next morning. "Mr. Baker," she said after reviewing my evidence, "your wife has been very busy." Patricia was in her 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm competence that comes from handling messy divorces for 20 years. "The good news is that you have excellent documentation of her adultery and her premeditation in planning this divorce. The bad news is that she's gotten a significant head start in controlling the narrative." "What do you mean?" "I've already heard from her attorney. They're claiming you've been drinking heavily, behaving erratically, and that you abandoned the marital home without provocation. They're seeking a temporary restraining order and exclusive use of the house. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach." "On what grounds?" "They claim you're emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous. They cite your physical confrontation with Mr. Garris as evidence." I slapped him once. He was in my bed with my wife. "I understand, but legally you assaulted him. They're using that as evidence of violent tendencies." Patricia spread the printed emails across her desk like a poker hand. "However, we have ammunition of our own. The premeditation, the adultery, the attempt to manipulate legal proceedings, it's all here in black and white. What's our next move?" "We file first. Divorce papers, citing adultery and abandonment of marital duties. We also file a counter-motion regarding the house and assets. But Mr. Baker, I need to ask, have you been drinking heavily?" "I've had some drinks. I'm not an alcoholic. Because if there's any truth to their claims about your stability, we need to address it head-on. Get you into counseling, document your sobriety, whatever it takes." I thought about the past 2 weeks on the boat, the nightly trips to Murphy's Tavern, the bourbon that had become my primary food group. I'll stop drinking, I said. Whatever it takes. Good. And Mr. Baker? This is going to get ugly. Your wife has been planning this for months. She's not going to give up easily. I left Patricia's office with a clear head and a clearer purpose. Maggie wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd just taught the rules to someone who had nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I drove to the boys' schools. Sid was between classes at BU, sitting on a bench outside the engineering building with a textbook open on his lap. Dad? He looked surprised to see me. You look better. I'd showered, shaved, and put on clean clothes for the first time in 2 weeks. I feel better. We need to talk. About you and Mom? About the truth. I told him everything. Not the graphic details, but the facts. The affair, the premeditation, the attempts to paint me as unstable. Sid listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. I don't want you to hate your mother, I said when I finished. But I need you to know what really happened. Sid was quiet for a long moment, staring at his textbook without seeing it. I knew something was wrong, he said finally. Mom's been different lately. Happier, but in a weird way, like she had a secret. She did. And all that stuff about you being unstable? Your mother is trying to control how this divorce plays out. She wants to be the victim, which means I have to be the villain. Sid closed his textbook and looked at me directly. What are you going to do? I'm going to fight back. But I wanted you and Jimmy to hear the truth from me first. Does Jimmy know? You're my first stop. Sid nodded slowly. Dad? For what it's worth, I never believed the stuff about you being unstable. You're the most stable person I know. Those words meant more to me than any legal victory could have. I hugged my son, probably tighter than necessary, and drove to Northeastern to have the same conversation with Jimmy. By evening, both boys knew the truth. They were angry, confused, and hurt, but they knew their father wasn't the villain in this story. That night, instead of going to Murphy's Tavern, I stayed on the boat and made a list. Not a to-do list, but a target list. Everyone who had believed Maggie's lies, everyone who had written me off as unstable, everyone who had chosen sides without knowing the facts. It was time to set the record straight. The counterattack began on Wednesday morning. I'd spent Tuesday night preparing, organizing evidence, and making phone calls. By dawn, I was ready to burn Maggie's carefully constructed narrative to the ground. My first stop was Tom and Carol Richardson, our neighbors who'd been so sympathetic to Maggie's plight. I knocked on their door at 8 a.m., knowing Tom would be having coffee before work. John. Carol answered the door, her face showing surprise and something that might have been fear. How are you? We've been worried. I'm fine, Carol. Better than fine, actually. I wanted to clear up some misunderstandings about my separation from Maggie. Tom appeared behind her, coffee mug in hand. Sure, John. Come in. I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where we'd played cards dozens of times, where we'd shared neighborhood gossip and weekend plans. But this time, I was there as a prosecutor presenting evidence. Maggie told you I was having problems at work, right? That I was drinking and acting erratically? They exchanged glances. Well, yes, Tom said carefully. She seemed pretty concerned about you. I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of the hotel receipts, the email correspondence with divorce attorneys, the timeline of Maggie's affair. This is what really happened, I said, watching their faces change as they absorbed the evidence. My wife has been having an affair with her boss for months. She's been planning our divorce since August, and she's been painting me as unstable to improve her legal position. Carol's hand went to her mouth. Oh my God, John. We had no idea. Of course you didn't. Maggie is very good at playing the victim. but I wanted you to know the truth before this gets messier." Tom leaned back in his chair, processing what he'd just learned. "So when she said you just walked out, I caught them in our bed. In our house. I asked her to explain, and she told me it was my fault for not appreciating her." "Jesus," Tom muttered. "I left the Richardsons' house knowing I'd won back 2 allies. More importantly, I'd planted seeds of doubt about Maggie's credibility that would spread through our social circle like wildfire. My next stop was Maggie's workplace. Morrison, Garris, and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown office building, all glass and steel and expensive furniture designed to intimidate clients into paying higher fees. I didn't have an appointment, but I had something better. 20 years of marriage to a woman who'd told me every office secret, every piece of gossip, every detail about her coworkers' lives. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, whom I'd met at office Christmas parties, looked nervous when I approached her desk. "Mr. Baker, I didn't expect to see you here. Are you looking for Maggie?" "Actually, I'm looking for everyone except Maggie. I have some information about her relationship with Mr. Garris that I think the other partners should know about." Ashley's eyes widened. Office gossip was currency in places like this, and I'd just offered her the equivalent of winning lottery numbers. "Mr. Morrison is in his office," she said, lowering her voice. "Should I tell him you're here?" "Please do." James Morrison was the founding partner, a man in his 60s who'd built the firm's reputation on integrity and professionalism. He was also, according to Maggie, increasingly concerned about Brett Garris's judgment and leadership potential. Morrison's office was exactly what you'd expect. Leather-bound books, expensive art, a view of Boston Harbor that probably cost more in rent than most people made in a year. "Jon Baker," Morrison said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles with Maggie." "That's actually why I'm here, Mr. Morrison. I think you should know that your senior partner has been having an affair with my wife, and it's been affecting their work performance." Morrison's face went carefully neutral. "That's a serious accusation. It's a serious situation." I pulled out my phone again, showing him the same evidence I'd shown the Richardsons. Hotel receipts charged to Brett's company credit card, emails sent during work hours, photos taken in what appeared to be Brett's office after hours. Morrison studied the evidence with the careful attention of a man who'd spent 40 years evaluating facts and testimony. "How long has this been going on?" he asked finally. "At least 6 months, based on the emails. Probably longer." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the harbor view. "Mr. Baker, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I have to ask, what do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just thought you should know that your senior partner has been using company resources to conduct an affair, and that he and my wife have been planning to use false claims about my mental health to manipulate divorce proceedings." I showed him the emails about documenting my erratic behavior and the consultation with divorce attorneys. Morrison's expression darkened. "They discussed using mental health claims?" "Your senior partner was present when my wife consulted with attorneys about having me declared mentally unstable. He was helping her build a case based on lies. I left Morrison's office knowing I'd lit a fuse that would burn slowly but inevitably toward Brett Garris's career. Law firms lived and died by their reputations, and partners who used company resources for affairs while helping to file false legal claims didn't tend to keep their partnerships very long. My final stop of the day was the most important one. Maggie's sister Janet lived in Cambridge, in a house that Maggie visited every Sunday for what she called sister time, but which was actually strategic planning sessions for whatever drama was currently consuming their lives. Janet had never liked me, had always thought Maggie settled when she married a marine engineer instead of a lawyer or doctor. She'd been one of Maggie's primary sources of support during our separation, which meant she was also one of the primary spreaders of the "Jon is unstable" narrative. I knocked on Janet's door at 6 p.m., knowing she'd be home from her job at an insurance company. "Jon?" She looked genuinely shocked to see me. "What are you doing here?" "I came to show you something, Janet. Something about your sister that I think you should see." Janet reluctantly let me into her living room, a space decorated with the kind of aggressive femininity that seemed designed to make men uncomfortable. Pink flowers, throw pillows with inspirational quotes, photos of Janet and Maggie at various girls' trips and spa weekends. "Janet, Maggie told you I was having a breakdown, right? That I was drinking too much and behaving erratically?" "Well, yes, she's been very worried about you." I pulled out the printed emails and spread them across Janet's coffee table like a tarot reading. "This is what your sister has really been doing." Janet read in silence, her face growing paler with each page. The hotel receipts, the explicit emails, the consultation with divorce attorneys, the plan to have me declared mentally unstable. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Maggie said you just walked out, that you'd been impossible to live with." "I walked out after I found her in our bed with her boss. Everything else, the drinking, the erratic behavior, the abandonment, it's all lies designed to help her win a divorce settlement." Janet stared at the evidence scattered across her coffee table. "She's been lying to me? She's been lying to everyone. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I left Janet's house knowing I'd just removed Maggie's primary emotional support system. Janet was many things: judgmental, self-righteous, meddling, but she wasn't tolerant of deception, especially when she'd been deceived herself. That evening, I returned to the boat feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation. That ship had sailed the moment I found Brett in our bed, but hope for justice. Hope that the truth would matter more than Maggie's carefully constructed lies. My phone rang as I was heating up a can of soup for dinner. It was Sid. "Dad, Mom called me tonight. She was crying, saying people were spreading lies about her. She said you were trying to destroy her reputation." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I knew about Brett. I told her you'd shown me the emails and the evidence, and that I didn't appreciate being lied to for months." "How did she react?" "She hung up on me. Then she called back an hour later and tried to convince me that you'd fabricated everything. That you'd somehow faked emails and hotel receipts because you were having a mental breakdown." I closed my eyes. Even caught red-handed, Maggie was still trying to manipulate our children. "Do you believe her?" I asked. "Dad, I'm studying computer engineering. I know how hard it would be to fake months of email correspondence with consistent metadata and timestamps. Either you're a criminal mastermind, or Mom's been lying to all of us. And which do you think is more likely?" Sid was quiet for a moment. "I think my mom is someone I don't recognize anymore." After we hung up, I sat in the boat's small cabin and realized that I'd won the first major battle. The truth was spreading faster than Maggie's lies, and her support system was crumbling. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Tomorrow, I would start phase 2 of my counterattack, and by the time I was finished, everyone would know exactly who Maggie Baker really was. Thursday morning brought the kind of October storm that turns Boston Harbor into a washing machine. I woke up on the boat to the sound of waves slapping against the hull and rain hammering the cabin roof like machine gun fire. It seemed appropriate. Today was going to be a battle. My phone had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Maggie, Brett, Janet, various neighbors and friends. The evidence I'd shared yesterday was spreading through our social circle like a virus, and everyone wanted to either apologize, take sides, or demand explanations. I ignored them all and focused on the day's mission: complete and total destruction of the narrative that I was an unstable drunk who'd abandoned his family. First stop, my office. Bob was waiting with coffee and a grim expression. "Jesus Christ, John, what did you do yesterday?" I told the truth. "Why?" "Because Maggie called here last night, crying, claiming you were having a psychotic break and spreading lies about her. She said you'd been stalking her, harassing her friends, and that she was afraid for her safety." I sat down at my desk and fired up my computer. And what did you tell her? I told her that the Jon Baker I know doesn't lie, doesn't stalk people, and sure as hell doesn't have psychotic breaks. But Jon, she sounded genuinely scared. She should be scared. Her house of lies is collapsing. I pulled up my email and started typing. If Maggie wanted to escalate this into a public relations war, I was happy to oblige. But I had advantages she didn't. The truth, evidence, and 20 years of knowing exactly how to hurt her where it mattered most. My first email went to every member of our country club, where Maggie served on the social committee and prided herself on being part of the inner circle of wives who planned charity events and gossiped about everyone else's marriages. Dear friends, I wrote, I wanted to address some rumors that have been circulating about my separation from Maggie. Rather than engage in he said, she said speculation, I'm attaching documented evidence of what actually occurred. I believe you deserve to know the facts before drawing conclusions about either of our characters. I attached selected emails, hotel receipts, and a timeline of events. Nothing graphic or unnecessarily cruel, but enough evidence to make it clear that Maggie had been lying to everyone about the reasons for our separation. My second email went to our church congregation. Maggie had been active in the women's ministry, often speaking about the importance of marriage, commitment, and Christian values. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My third email went to parents from the boys' schools, people who'd known us for years and had probably heard Maggie's version of events through the suburban parent gossip network. By noon, I'd sent the evidence to over 200 people in our social circle. Not indiscriminately. I was careful to target people who knew us well, who would be shocked by the revelation that their friend and neighbor had been living a double life. My phone started ringing immediately. Some calls were supportive, people apologizing for believing Maggie's lies. Others were angry, accusing me of publicly humiliating my wife. A few were confused, asking for more explanation. I answered the supportive calls and ignored the rest. At 1 p.m., Patricia Wells called with an update on the legal front. Mr. Baker, Maggie's attorney, filed an emergency motion this morning seeking a restraining order against you. They're claiming harassment, stalking, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Based on what? Based on your activities yesterday. Visiting neighbors, going to her workplace, contacting her sister. They're painting it as a pattern of intimidation. I laughed, which probably wasn't the reaction Patricia expected. I visited 3 sets of people and showed them evidence of her adultery and deception. If that's harassment, then every divorce attorney in Massachusetts is guilty of stalking. The judge will see it that way too, especially given the evidence we have of her premeditation and false statements. But Jon, you need to be careful. Don't give them any ammunition to use against you. Understood. Also, there's been an interesting development. I got a call from James Morrison's office this morning. Apparently, they're conducting an internal investigation into Brett Garris's conduct, and they'd like to interview you as a witness. When? Tomorrow afternoon. And Jon? Morrison's firm represents some very influential people in this city. If Brett gets fired for this, it'll be front-page news in the legal community. Your wife picked the wrong partner to have an affair with. After hanging up with Patricia, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. In less than 24 hours, I'd managed to turn the tables completely. Maggie's reputation was in ruins, her support system had abandoned her, and her lover was about to lose his career. But I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I drove to the boys' schools again. Not to see them, I'd already accomplished that goal, but to make sure their friends' parents had received my email and understood the situation. The response was everything I'd hoped for. Parents who'd been cool toward me just days before were now apologetic and supportive. The narrative had shifted completely. I was no longer the unstable husband who'd abandoned his family, but the wronged man who'd been betrayed and lied about. At 4 p.m., I received a text message from Jimmy. Dad, Mom showed up at my dorm crying. She says you're trying to destroy her life and that she's going to have you arrested. She's talking crazy. Should I be worried? I called him immediately. Jimmy, where is your mother now? She left about an hour ago. Dad, she looked really bad, like she hadn't slept or eaten. She kept saying you were spreading lies and that everyone was turning against her. Are you safe? Yeah, I'm fine. But Dad, what's going to happen to her? I mean, I know what she did was wrong, but she's still my mom. It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding. In my quest for justice, I'd focused on exposing Maggie's lies and protecting my own reputation. But I hadn't really considered what would happen to her when the truth came out. I don't know, son. But she made her choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. I know. It's just, this is all so messed up. Yeah, it is. But it's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix it. After we hung up, I sat in my truck outside Jimmy's dorm and realized that I'd reached a crossroads. I could continue the campaign of exposure, making sure everyone in Boston knew what Maggie had done. Or I could declare victory and focus on rebuilding my own life. The decision was made for me when my phone rang. It was Tom Richardson, my neighbor. John, I think you should know, Maggie came by our house about an hour ago. She was pretty upset. She accused us of betraying her, said we'd been poisoned against her by your lies. What did you tell her? I told her we'd seen the evidence and that we believed you. She started screaming, John. Really screaming. Carol had to close the windows because the whole neighborhood could hear her. What was she screaming about? She said she was going to make you pay for destroying her life. She said you'd regret ever crossing her, and that she had ways of hurting you that you'd never see coming. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. Maggie wasn't just embarrassed or humiliated, she was furious. And a furious Maggie was a dangerous Maggie. Tom, if she comes back, don't let her in. Call the police if you have to. John, do you think she'd actually do something? I don't know, but I'm not taking any chances. I hung up and immediately called Patricia Wells. Patricia, I need to know, how quickly can we get that restraining order reversed and filed against Maggie instead? What's happened? I told her about Maggie's visits to the boys, her confrontation with the neighbors, her threats. I can file an emergency motion tonight, Patricia said, but John, you need to be very careful. If Maggie is as unstable as she sounds, there's no telling what she might do. I drove back to the marina as darkness fell over Boston Harbor. The storm was getting worse, and the boat rocked violently as I climbed aboard. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was afraid of my wife. That night, I sat in the boat's cabin with a baseball bat across my knees and my phone within easy reach. Every sound made me tense. Footsteps on the dock, voices from other boats, the creak of rigging in the wind. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I know things about you that would destroy your precious reputation. Sleep well, John. I forwarded the message to Patricia and tried to get some sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Maggie's face, not the woman I'd married 20 years ago, but the stranger she'd become. Cold, calculating, and apparently capable of anything. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning.